All right, today we're going to be talking about is Introduction to Writing Triangle Congruence Proofs. So let's first talk about the 5 ways we learn to prove that they're congruent. So we talked about side, angle, side. We talked about angle, angle, side, side, angle, side, 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 and hypotenuse, leg. So those are all ways to prove triangles are congruent. The ways that you cannot prove would be side, side, angle, or angle, angle, or angle, angle, angle. So those are not ways. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at shapes and we're going to start figuring out all the information we can gather from there. So the first thing we're going to do is when we're writing proofs is you're going to name all of the congruent parts given. So this is what is written either in the proof or what is labeled. So written or labeled. Either written or labeled. Did I spell that right? I don't know. Okay, here we go. I teach math. Alright, so anyways, let's look at what's provided. So we have segment LO is congruent to segment VO, and we know that because it is marked. We have, let me erase this little part right here because that is not provided. We have segment LE is congruent to segment VE, and we know that because it is marked. Alright, so now any other information we can gather from this. So, like I showed you before, it's not listed, but we know that OE is congruent to itself. So this is any information we found. So OE, because we have this triangle, and we have this triangle. Oops, sorry. So we know OE is going to be congruent to itself. So segment OE. All right. And we know that the reason is because if it's congruent with itself, it's the reflexive property. All right. So now we wrote the information given, we have the information found, and we gave a reason for this. Now we're going to give the reason that they're congruent, and in this case, it's side, side, side. So if you look, you have side, side, and side. So those 3 things right here are proving those are congruent. And then the last thing is to name it. So depending on how you start this, you have LOE, so triangle LOE. So since we started with LOE, we started with L, we have to start with the corresponding angle, which is V. All right? And then since we have O in the middle, let's go for both. And then the last should be E. Oops. So you're going to write your final statement. So you're proving that those 2 triangles are congruent based off of the given information, the found information, and a reason. All right, so let's try this one. Let me erase the information that was provided, or not provided. All right, so information that was given. In this case, it showed us that angle S is congruent to angle U, which we have here. It also showed us that IF, segment IF, is congruent to segment NF, and we know because they're labeled right here. So we got that. So this is all the given, so written or labeled. All right, now we need to think about information that can be found. So in this case, we have vertical angles. So I know that angle SFI is congruent to angle, remember since we started with S, we have to start with U, so UFN. So remember, order matters for that. And we know that they're congruent because of definition of vertical angles and the vertical angle theorem. So right here, that's telling me those are congruent. And then last, we're given the reason for the congruent. So we know they are congruent. The two triangles are congruent because you have angle, angle, side. And then last but not least, write your triangles, name the congruent triangles. So we're going to start with SFI. So since we started with F, order matters, we have to start with U and go UFN. So you write your congruent statement down there. All right. What you're going to do is you're going to try this one. And then we're going to get started with some proofs. All right. So for this, given, this is the information given. So given that angle G is congruent to angle I, so angle G is congruent to angle I, so notice I labeled my figure. Segment FH bisects angle GFI, so this one bisects, so if it bisects GFI, I know this one is congruent to this one. So those are all given. So if you notice, this is all provided up here. Now we have to know what in the world is a bisector. It says bisect, but what is it? So it's telling us when you bisect it, we know angle GFH is congruent to angle IFH. So GFH is congruent to IFH. And we know that because of the definition of a bisector. Oh, I have no idea what just happened here. That was crazy. Okay, so now let's go ahead and let's write this last part here. So we said the last part is that we can prove that's not written is this last FH, segment FH, is congruent to itself. So we can actually write FH, segment FH, is congruent to segment FH. And we know that because of the reflexive property. So again, it's equal to itself. And then the last step is to write your congruency statement. So we need to name the triangles. So again, order matters. I'm going to write that one more time. It has to go in order. So if you were to have triangle GFH, since we started with G, we said G goes with I, so I has to be first. We went to F next, so you have to go to F next because these two are congruent. And then lastly, they both go to H, so there. And we know that these two are congruent because you have angle, angle, side. All right, that's the first part of doing your proofs. So now let's go ahead and let's do some other ones. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to erase that, but then I'll put it back. Okay, for this, we need to think about what information is given and then make sure you label your diagram. So for here, it's given that BC is congruent to DC. And I also know AC is congruent to EC. So make sure you mark that up. And I know that these are all congruent because it's given right here. So now we need to say, what's the information that we have to find? Well, we know that BCA and DCE are vertical angles. So in order for them to be vertical angles, or to know that, we know it because it is the definition of a vertical angle. Now that we know the definition of a vertical angle, now we can actually label them and say, okay, well, BCA must or is congruent to DCE. E. So now it's like first we defined, and then now we give value. So this is your define, and this is your value. All right, so make sure you do that. And then last but not least, you have to name your triangles, and we need to figure out why they're congruent by what. So remember, it's BCA is congruent to DCE, and we know that because of side, angle, side. All right. I want you to go ahead, and they have some information, so that should help you out. But I want you to go ahead and I want you to try this one. If you get stuck, that's okay. But just remember the word perpendicular bisector, and then look at the information that you have here, and then write down what you think should go in these spots. All right? Let's go ahead to this next one. Oops. All right, and it looks like that is it. So just remember, you want to make sure you know these angles: side, angle, side, angle, angle, side, angle, side, angle, side, 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 hypotenuse, leg, and then you go given, found, reason, and then give your side, angle, side, and then lastly, name the triangles. And that's how you do your proofs.